One tip, something I like to do while I'm pounding all these holes out, you'll get in a groove and kind of zone out, and maybe you'll start missing this a little bit. I find if I'm down here and I'm lining it up and I go to hit a hole, as I work myself away, I can't reach. Whenever I set my mallet down, if I have it so it sets right to the right hand side, I always have that right distance set up so I don't have to focus as much on where the mallet is. Where if I got it somewhere else, I feel like I go to a new hole and I gotta try to reach, make sure I get to it, and after a few holes I'm missing. But just punch all your holes out, cut all your parts out. This time I'm dyeing my parts afterwards. Dye them before, however you want to do it. I also like to start in the middle if there's holes and things to be punched. Start in the middle and work my way to the edges. I don't know if it makes a huge difference, but if I start punching the holes and work my way towards the middle, by the time I get to the middle parts, especially on bigger things, the paper will stretch just a little bit. I try to put tape over most of it, but if you got a real big part, sometimes it's good to put tape across the whole thing and start in the middle. Might help keep your holes just a little bit more accurate. Sometimes having some tape across where you're punching holes will help this slide out a little bit better. Sometimes when I'm punching holes where it's just paper, it seems to stick a little bit more versus where there's tape. Sometimes it helps a little bit. For tight corners, I suggest using some hole punches. If you tip it away from the corner just a tiny bit because of the angle of the end of these, you'll get a little bit of a straighter edge. Not too much though, just a little bit. Whenever possible, I cut away. If I pop some holes, cut away from that corner so I can see right where I am in relation to the line, and just slowly work my way, make sure I get right on that line. And if I'm coming around this corner towards it, I'll cut towards those holes in those corners there. Once I get to the side, I stop and come from that hole so I can see right where I am in relation to the line, and if I need to slowly work my way over a little, I can. As long as I stay on the line, I'll meet right up with that previous cut. And when you're cutting a pattern like this out, you want to keep your scissors flush to the skin. You don't want to just haphazardly cut across. You're going to tear into a lot of this, and if some of this is folded way over, it could get too short where you need it to be long. So when you cut this, you're going to want your scissors flush with the skin underneath and do little clips. Basically, I'm just trimming it back to where these stitch holes are. The leather, once it's on there, will go past it, but I don't want to trim to where the leather is going to be. Just to the stitch holes is enough. Get rid of some of this bulk, that way when that piece comes in here, you'll have a nice edge right just right on there, perfect. going to go back and do these holes on here now. I make sure that's kind of out of the way as best as I can, and then I make sure to slide it up to the edge of a board. You could use a piece of leather or the edge of a cutting table or something. Get that wool out of the way. If you feel any get under there, stop, push it out of the way. And I might even raise this up a little bit so that I can just slide it right up and it's at the right height, because right now I gotta press it down. Okay, if you want to see how to do the single shoulder strap, that's in the video with my laptop bag. This video I'm just going over the backpack straps. The process is basically the same though. So there's two different ways you can do this, and there's an option on the pattern itself. Now this is just a tiny bit thinner than if I was doing it the other way, but this will have the sheep's wool inlaid into it, and then it will be attached to here. Before you attach it to there, we're going to put these tabs on. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just cut this main part out of something thicker like a 10 ounce and not line the back, just dye the back, and then you won't mess with those other steps. You'll just put the tabs on and that'll be that. If you're wanting to see how to do the shoulder strap, the single shoulder strap, that's in the video with this laptop bag. First thing I'm going to do is get this wool liner in here. So I'll flip this to the back side. Just get that wool out of the way. You can grab your needle, just press it down, fold it underneath there. First few stitches are going to be kind of a pain to hold everything in place, but once you get going, you're good. Just use that needle to press that wool out from under here. As long as you're holding stuff out of the way as you're doing this, you should be good. I will make sure it's not in there before I tighten this. I prefer to come in from underneath here. Another thing you can do is after you get a bunch of that wool out of the way, just put a clip an inch or so down. That way you don't have to try to hold it and mess with the needles at the same time. Now you want to snug this thread up, but you don't want to wrench on it because it's such a small strip. It's going to start tightening everything up and bunching it up, and then it won't line up with the other part. It's alright if it gets a little bit smaller from the thread being real tight, but just snugging it up is plenty. Line up the holes and put this down right about here. Then you can do quite a few holes without struggling quite as much. Okay, this first center panel is on. I just tied a knot in the back side there. Okay, I'm about to start this next one. And what I like to do is start on a corner or something where I can clearly see these two holes are right on the corner, and these two holes are right on that same corner in that same spot. So I'll pick one of those and start from there. If I just start randomly on one of the straightaways, there's a good chance I'm going to be off by a hole. I got 2 of the panels done, but I wanted to point something out. When you're stitching through the bottom of this, you have to be careful. You can see how I came through the leather, but then I missed the skin for the lining, so it looped around the edge there. If you do that a bunch, probably isn't a huge deal, but it'll sit nicer if you don't. This padding layer is done. I just like to go across the edge and pull any of the loose stuff off. Next we'll get the tabs going here. So this is the setup for the short pieces on the back right here. So this will just be clips that clip to the top of like a backpack or a laptop bag or something like that. I also have the longer setup, and you'll be able to choose between the two. The longer setup has the billets, and it will have the clip at the end of a part with a buckle, so that those parts will be adjustable. This is for if you want the bag riding lower on your back, a little bit less strain, or if you're doing it for like a disc golf bag or something like that. First I'll go over these 1.5 inch clasps. So we'll put these on, and then we'll sew it to the back of this. And there's also going to be a buckle version that will go on the end of the long billets that go to the end on these ends. We'll go over that in a minute here. So if I'm sewing, in most cases it's just 4 times the length. So I'll take a piece of thread and measure the distance, and then 4 times that, and then cut that off of the spool. Since these swivel, it really doesn't matter which way you slide these on. So what I'll do is hold them up to some light, get the holes lined up, and then I'll put this in my stitching pony and stitch this on here. I'll do both of these, and then we'll get to sewing them onto here. So here I'll point out why I put it in a stitching pony. Speeds the process up quite a bit if you don't have to hold and manipulate the part. You got something holding it for you. And if you go the same way every time, the stitches will look nice. I always come through this side first, and I grab the needle against this needle with this hand, rotate it around while I'm holding this other thread down, and then I'll go through the hole, grabbing it with that hand, so then I can pull both needles at the same time and tighten. And once you get good at it, you can go pretty quick. Both of these tabs are sewn up, and they will be sewn to the end on this side. This is the shorter version. There is going to be a longer version on the pattern as well, and we'll cover that also. After I get these sewn to there, I'll sew the buckles and the clasps to the end of those for the billets that will be on this end. Okay, got both of these tabs on there. Next, we're going to make the 2 buckle tabs, which here's one right here. Just got to put that clip on and that buckle on. And just make sure when you get this buckle ready that that's flipped the right way, and that you know exactly which way it's going to go, so then you can just come in like so and double check and make sure that's on the correct way. The last thing you want to do is have to strip stitches out and redo it. So, and this swivels so you don't have to really pay attention. Sew this on first, sew that on, and you're going to end up with this. Which this billet will go through. We'll put that strap through there, and then it will attach to the other end of these. And once those are all on, then we'll flip this around and attach the padding. All these stitch holes around the full length of the billet we're going to want to stitch, but at some point it's going to be stitched to this main section, or main part here. So I want to find the hole that it starts at. So first I'll quick show you how I thread these needles. Just go through like you normally would, but then you come back on it and put the needle through the center of the thread and hold that end and pull it through, so then it locks it in there and you're not going to be fighting it while you're trying to sew. Alright, I can see that the first hole from this corner is the third one down, so that's actually the hole I'm going to start on before I even sew it to here. Start on that hole, and I'm going to do the stitch all the way around the end of this billet and back up, and when I get right up to that hole, that's when I'm going to put it on top of here and sew it down. Then I'll tie a little knot in the back, since this is going to be covered up with that padding. Sew it around the whole edge from that hole we started on, and you can see how I popped up through the first hole that's in the main backpack strap section there, because there wasn't a hole here for me to go down through. So you finish like this. Then when you lay it down on here, you'll come back through that stitch, and that'll be the first one that attaches it to that main piece. So I won't come back up through that last hole, I'll only go back down through it. Just tie the knot in the back, cover it up with the padding. So when I tie a knot, I always go through twice, that double, tighten that up, and then just do a standard box knot on top of that, at least twice. And I'll put a little dab of glue on there just to make sure that knot doesn't loosen up. And this thread's waxed and it's sticky, so it's not as huge a deal. But if you're using that nylon or something that's real slippery, you're going to need to probably back stitch and knot, and some of that thread seems to be way too slick. If you get a good nice waxed thread for things like this, all you need is to come across it and then backstitch. You don't have to knot it or glue it. When I don't get to see the other side, I like to always come up through the back side. But what I use is this top needle to feel underneath. So how I do it is I come through with that needle enough so I could feel it with this one, and either I'll just get the point to meet right where the hole is on the leather, feel for it and get it right there, or I'll match that angle, and as I'm pulling that needle out, I'll follow it right through the hole. Okay, both the larger tabs are on there and both the thinner ones are on here. So what I'm going to do is flip this around, and this padding piece is going to go on here. So what I like to do, especially on the other single shoulder strap that will be in the pattern, is put some glue on here. So I'll actually start by just doing the center part, and I'm going to grab a bunch of clips. Grab a bunch of clips, and as I get this situated, make sure I get those holes pretty much lined up. I'll put clips to hold it on, let that glue set up, and then I'll sew it on. I like to do this just because of the friction and the use that this is going to get. I don't want these to stretch out and get out of shape. Actually, I think this time I'll just glue the whole thing down all at once. I just try not to smash that glue down into these stitches on here. I don't want it to push out to the front side. If you're doing with contact cement, I'd suggest just doing like one of these panels or maybe half at a time. Give you a little more time to get it lined up properly. Now from the sewing and pulling, the compression of the stitching and stuff, this might be just a little bit off. So that's why I'm going to go across, make sure the holes are lining up, and put clips on. You can use a needle too. Should be able to see through them. When in doubt, use extra clips. It's always better to have too much than not enough. Might be good to start at the end here since this one got stretched out. Sometimes you gotta look on here and see if the holes are lining up. Keep working your way down. I'm looking underneath to see each hole. There's a little bit of a bow right here now, so I'll put it where those ones line up and then flatten that out to match and throw some extra clips in here. The other option is to put a reinforcement piece on the back of this before you even put it down on here. Then you don't got to clip it, you just go one hole at a time. You want to make sure that glue stays kind of loose, a little tacky longer. Give your leather a spritz of water first. You're seeing the holes line up, I see the light through them. Clips like this, I just make sure I go right on the stitch line because they do leave little impressions sometimes. And press this down where the glue is. Let that tack up and start sewing. I started with the glue still wet a little bit, so I'm leaving all the clips on while I go here. Just making sure this wool stays out of the way. If I feel it start to bunch up and get in there, I'll stop and peel it out of there. Okay, I got the padding sewn on the back of this. And I'll put on these two pieces. Now I will go through the same backpack strap setup, but it won't have the padding. So this main piece will just be a piece of like 9 or 10 ounce. And then it will also be the version where these main straps are longer for a bag that will ride more towards your lower back, or like a disc golf bag that you want to ride lower. So here's the main piece, and I dyed the back as well since we're not going to have any layers here. It's just going to be this single piece. Really the only difference that you'll see on this one is since these straps are going to be that longer version, it'll basically be a wider version of these skinny ones here. You'll have the billet with a bunch of holes on it, and then we'll be making similar pieces where you'll have the clasp and a buckle. Otherwise it's exactly the same. And since there won't be those other layers, when you're sewing these billets on to this main section, you don't want to just make the knots in the back here like I did previously. So that I can go around and instead of tying it on the back, I'll go through in between these two layers, tie a knot, and tuck it in with some glue in between a couple of the stitches. It'll just look a lot cleaner, look nicer. You won't have any knots digging into your back or anything like that. Okay, both of these are done. I'll do the same thing to the smaller ones. Put that buckle and the clasp on there. Then I'll do the decorative stitches around the edges of stuff. And then, like before, what I'll do with the decorative stitches is I'll start right at that first hole where it'll attach to this part, go around, and then when I get back up to here, I'll throw it on this end, go around there. Alright, so this is that main part that I'm putting the decorative stitch around the edge. And what I decided to do was start from the center on the back, and I'll back up the camera and show you, but right where this tab is going to be is where I ended. Even though I had some thread left, I ended it so that I could back stitch and hide that back behind there. So what I did is I went to here where it'll be hidden and back stitched 3, and then just tied it over the edge so that I can start here with this next piece of thread and it's not going to pull any of that out. So once I get a couple stitches ahead of here, I'll cut that off. Well, here's where I started, and I just worked my way to that end where it'll be hidden. And what I'm going to do now is work from this end to where it'll be hidden behind these two tabs. That way I'm not using 1,000 feet of thread, and by the time, if I did that, not that you couldn't, you go around the whole thing with a ridiculous amount of thread, you're pulling it over and over again, it could discolor and fray, so by the time you get all the way back around, it may not match. Now that I'm a couple stitches back, and I started again where that back stitch already was to really lock those in. That way I don't have to worry about gluing them or any of that. Just get rid of that knot. And then I'll trim this excess off. Same as last time, we're going to do 2 of these, buckle and a clip for the long thinner billets. So I'll sew both of those up, and we'll put some decorative stitches around the outside of these. Got the decorative stitching on this first tab done. And the only difference between this and that other one is instead of putting these on first and then doing that lining, this part's done. It was just a thick piece, so I came right up to where that first hole starts. I'm going to stitch this to here, come all the way around to here, tie a little knot, and tuck it in between these 2 last stitches so it holds in there. I don't come around the outside and stuff it from behind there. I'll do the same to the other side, and then the same thing to these wider straps. Okay, everything's done on this one. So you can see, instead of just having the clip right up here, we got a billet so I can put a buckle on there. That way it's adjustable and you can have this back piece exactly where you need it on your back, so your bag rides right on your lower back or lower if you want it. That's how a lot of people carry their disc golf bags. So now we just need to put all these on. You can see just that thick piece here, a single piece versus this one we made first. Excuse me. This one's got the shorter billets on the back, so this is more backpack style, or if you have like a case, laptop case or something. You could go with a shorter wool. You could even go with some kind of other skin and inlay it, put like a plug behind it if you didn't want the fur. maybe do like a stingray or something inlay. And I'll also be including this one in the pattern, just the single shoulder strap. So you'll have all the options for this one, and you'll have the options for this one as well. So it'll just be a pattern pack of the different straps and everything. But I will include all of those straps in with the laptop bag pattern too, if you just want to pick that up.